This is the Cliff Yates Show. Personal growth, motivation, inspiration, and philosophies for a great life.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Cliff Yates Show. As always, we are into motivation, inspiration, and philosophies that can help us live a greater life each and every day in every way. We're getting better and better. And thanks to everybody, our family is growing larger and larger. When I say family, I'm talking about the family who is following this show. I appreciate it. As a matter of fact, we're getting some family members from all over the world, surprisingly enough. Although, of course, my heart and soul is here in and devoted to and committed to the United States of America. But, of course, we welcome everybody from all over the world who is interested in thinking about how can we be better, do better, and share with others so that we can have a positive impact on their lives. And by doing so, we have a positive impact on ourselves. And in this episode, we're going to talk about the meditations. We're going to go into book 1 of the Meditations, written by Marcus Aurelius, one of the Roman emperors in the first century, 100-something AD. And Marcus Aurelius was an emperor who, at many times, he was on the front lines of battle when he would write notes to himself. In the translations from the Greek, it basically translates to English as notes to oneself. So he had written these notes to himself, and he had these thoughts. And it's kind of amazing. I think why a lot of people, even today, like to read the Meditations is because we know these writings. And it's kind of up in the air how they actually survived 2,000 years. These were the writings, and we're looking at the thoughts of a Roman emperor, and we can kind of think to ourselves, I have these same thoughts. People 2,000 years ago, someone who was the emperor of Rome was having the same questions, and he was trying to be better himself. And he was a philosopher. He would have rather been just a philosopher. He was kind of tasked with being the emperor when he was a very young man. Wouldn't have been his first choice, but serving as the emperor and also a judge, he took seriously, and he was known as one of the good emperors of Rome. And a little history. So I'm going to read from Meditations, and this is a copy that was suggested. This is one by Gregory Hayes. So I would suggest you get this copy. There are numerous translations of the Meditations, and it's interesting that Ryan Holiday suggested Gregory Hayes as the one to get. And Ryan Holiday, check him out. He has the Daily Stoic podcast, Daily Stoic, on the YouTube channel. Please, he is the resident expert on Stoicism, and that's who I first was introduced to Stoicism by. And so the Meditations, I'm reading from the Gregory Hayes. And it's funny, I'm here on our private island in upstate New York, and I actually had an old copy of the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius that have been here on the island for probably, I know this copy's been here for 30 or 40 years since I was a young man. So I don't know who would have bought that copy, but I have that copy, but which seems probably one of the original maybe translations because it's kind of complicated to read, but the copy by Gregory Hayes is easily understood, and we're going to be dealing with book 1, where Marcus is he's writing his thoughts down on his gratitude of lessons he's learned, and he's indebted to certain people for what they have taught him. And he's writing down what it is he's learned from these specific people in his life. Some of these people I'll give you a short history on. Some I have no idea. But I would suggest you read the Meditation. It's an amazing thing from someone who is trying to be a better person, as he is the emperor of Rome. He could have had anything he wanted. He had all the wealth he wanted, but yet he loved philosophy, which we know translated philo means love, Sophie, wisdom, the love of wisdom. And so this is I think you're gonna like this. I'm gonna read from book 1, but a little history from Gregory Hayes on book 1, and he kind of goes into Marcus had, he started his training when he was very young, and his training was conducted in Greek as well as Latin, so he would have been bilingual, although he wrote the Meditations in Greek. The philosophers of the time basically wrote all of their philosophies in Greek. And it says here, such training was conducted in Greek as well as Latin since at least the beginning of the 1st century. The Roman upper class had been essentially bilingual, and Marcus's spoken and written Greek would have been as fluent as the French of a 19th century Russian aristocrat or the Chinese of Han Japanese courtier. Marcus would have read Homer's Iliad and Odyssey and the tragedies of Euripides side by side with the Aeneid, and studied the speeches of the great Athenian orator Demosthenes as intensely as those of the Roman statesman Cicero. It was Greek writers and artists who constituted the intellectual elite at the capital. When in later life the emperor conversed with his court physician Galen, he would have done so in the latter's native tongue. Above all, Greek remained overwhelmingly the language of philosophy. In the late Republic and early Empire, writers like Lucretius, Cicero, and Seneca had worked to create a philosophical literature in Latin with notable success. But the great thinkers, Plato, Aristotle, Theophrastus, Zeno, Chrysippus, Epicurus, etc., had all been Greeks. Serious philosophical investigation required a familiarity with the language they wrote in and the terminology they developed. That Marcus composed his own meditations in Greek is natural enough. So a little background on Marcus. In 137 AD, when Marcus was 16, a crucial event took place. The reigning emperor Hadrian was childless. An illness had brought him near to death a year previously, and it was clear that he would not live forever. As we all know, we're in that boat. Hadrian owed his throne to his adoption by his predecessor and distant relative, Trajan. Following Trajan's example, Hadrian had designated the distinguished aristocrat Lucius Saonius Commodus, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, to succeed him. In 137, however, Saonius died unexpectedly, and Hadrian was forced to cast about for a new successor. His choice fell on the childless senator Antoninus, who he selected, with the provision that Antoninus would in turn adopt Marcus, who was his nephew by marriage, along with Saonius' son, Lucius Verus, then age 7. Marcus took on the family name of his adopted father, becoming Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. And somewhere, I don't know if it's written here, but when he was given the throne to rule Rome as emperor, he refused to take it alone, and he thought it only fair that he should be co-emperor with his brother Lucius Verus. Hadrian's death the following year left Marcus first in line for the throne. His education and that of the younger Verus were now matters of still greater concern, and it is clear that no expense was spared. For training in Greek rhetoric, he was entrusted to Herodes Atticus, a fabulously wealthy Athenian. By an accident of fate, many of Fronto's letters to Marcus have survived, and they illustrate the close relationship between student and teacher. They also suggest Fronto's regret at seeing Marcus move away from rhetoric to delve ever more deeply into philosophy. That was Marcus Aurelius' love, really was philosophy. He loved to read and learn, and he would have rather devoted his time to learning more than to being a politician. Marcus would have learned much outside the classroom as well. For training in legal and political matters and informal apprenticeship bound aristocratic use to older public figures. Men like Hunius Rusticus, whose influence Marcus chronicles in 1:7. We're going to be going to book 1, but the single greatest influence was surely Marcus's adopted father, Antoninus Pius. Marcus would have watched as Antoninus received embassies, tried legal cases, and dictated letters to his deputies. Meanwhile, Marcus's own position as heir apparent was signaled in various ways. In 140 AD, he served as consul at the age of 19 and would serve again in 145. In the same year, he married Antoninus's daughter, Faustina, to whom he pays tribute to in Meditations 1:17. Just a little background of Marcus. And like I said, it's kind of amazing he was writing these thoughts on how he could live a better life and how he could better be a philosopher in the study of Stoicism. And he would sometimes be quoting the teachings of Epictetus. And a student of Epictetus would write about what Epictetus taught in something called the Discourses. And Epictetus had been a slave who had won his freedom, we've talked about before, and he went on to have his own school of philosophy. And here Marcus, an emperor, is frequently quoting Epictetus, who had been a slave. And so but let's go to book 1. I want to give you a little background on, a little bit on Marcus Aurelius. There's a lot more that was going on in his life. He had 9 children died, I believe, of the plague. The plague was killing I don't know about millions, but maybe hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in Rome for more than, I think, 10, 11 years when Marcus Aurelius was the emperor. So he was dealing with the plague, his children dying. He had people trying to assassinate him. And he just had a lot of going on. And at the same time, he was just trying, how can I live a better life? How can I be a better person? And considered later in life, I think he was only around 60. It is written somewhere that one of his friends saw him with tablet in hand heading out of the palace. Where are you going, Marcus? He said, I am going to see Sextus the philosopher so that I can learn what I have yet not learned. So he was always yearning to be learning. Maybe that's a lesson that we can take. But let's go to book 1 of the Meditations, where Marcus is writing down who he's indebted to and has gratitude for the lessons that he got from them. And he writes down each person what he got from them. So book 1, he starts off thanking his grandfather. In a very short excerpt, he just says, I thank my grandfather for character and self-control. Seems to be it's a real theme in Marcus's writing, that self-control. He was just trying to be, not to be overly angered and to be in self-control. Number 2, he wrote, to my father, from my own memories and his reputation, integrity and manliness. And Marcus was always, he was basically at having private tutoring and private training from the time he was a little boy. My mother, her reverence for the divine, that she was aware of the divinity, that there was a God, there was someone better. And most of these philosophers, the Greek philosophers, most of them were pre-Christian, pre-Christ, although Seneca, I believe, was the one who was born at the same time as Christ. But yet the New Testament wasn't written yet. Christ was just starting his journey. And so, he didn't really start his own ministry until he was 33. So a lot of these Romans had no concept of Christianity or Christians, or it was very new. Nothing in his writings I see as being anti-Christian, although there is, if you research it, and I would hope not this to be true, that Marcus at one time, that he had Christians, that he put them to death in the arena for blasphemy. I don't know if that's true or not. His demeanor wouldn't seem to be someone who would be executing, but in the time of the day, maybe that's what happened. So he continues to write about my mother, her reverence for the divine. So she was aware of a divinity. She was aware of a God life. She had respect for that. that she believes there was a creator, that we were created and we were the creation. Her generosity, and not just her not doing wrong, her inability not only to do wrong, but even to conceive of doing it. So she must have been not only as much as you could be, a godly woman through reason. She reasoned that there was a God by everything that we can see around us, and we should be able to do that also. But she also, he was quite specific in saying not only did she not do wrong, she would never even think of doing wrong. And he wrote that in his meditations. And the simple way she lived, not in the least like the rich. She lived, obviously, a simple life, not a lot of pomp and circumstances, which was kind of an interesting upbringing from his mother. And here is Marcus being trained by Hadrian to become the next emperor, and he's around the palace and all of these people who are rich, and he has seen the difference maybe in their character, and he's remembering his mother, she knew of the divine, she couldn't think of doing wrong, she lived a great life, and she lived a simple life, and he remembered and learned that from his mother. My great-grandfather, to avoid the public schools, and this is interesting, so from his great-grandfather, he learned, avoid the public schools. I certainly have many friends and family now who are avoiding the public schools. So apparently history is repeating itself. And just a lot of people I know, because they have the wherewithal to do so, they're sending their kids to private schools. And, we're seeing, look what's going on today with the school board meetings and what they're trying to introduce into the schools. So 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome, is learning from his great-grandfather, avoid the public schools. This is his writing, hire good private teachers and accept the resulting costs as money well spent. So even though it's going to cost you dearly to hire private tutors and schooling for your children, you're going to see that money is well spent. And he learned that from his great-grandfather, and he writes about it. My first teacher, not to support this side or that in chariot racing, this fighter or that in the games. That's interesting. So maybe the lesson he's learning from his first teacher is to, and maybe we can learn from it. Sometimes I try to enjoy maybe a football game or a tennis match. I just try to enjoy it without picking one side or the other. Oh, that's hard to do. You always want to root for somebody over somebody else. Or I like to root for the underdog because I like to see the impossible happen. The person who cannot win, yes, they can, because I know you can win, I can win, even when people say we can't. So if we're underdogs, and we can do it. I'm just encouraging you as I read from the meditations. From his first teacher, he's also continuing on, to put up with discomfort and not make demands, to do my own work, mind my own business, and have no time for slanderers. So he's learning from his first teacher to stay focused on what is in front of him to do, what is his job to do. Don't worry about other people. Do what's in front of you, what is at hand for you, and don't have time for slanderers, which I would say is gossipers or people who are talking about other people who would put other people down. Don't have time for those. Keep those people out of your life. A lesson we could take today. 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius is learning that lesson. Maybe it would be good for us to learn that too. I think so. Number 6, he writes, this is about Diogenetus. I hope I'm saying that right. Diognetus. When I researched him, it was written that he was an early tutor of Marcus. So one of his tutors, he's writing to himself, not to waste time on nonsense. I could take a lesson from that. Don't waste time on nonsense. Not to be taken in by conjurers and hoodoo artists with their talk about incantations and exorcism and all the rest of it. So I would say that not to be taken in by people who are maybe devil worshippers or voodooists or, I don't know, hypnotists or, well, let me read on. We can take from that what we will, as it was written in its time. It probably had different meaning. Not to be obsessed with quail fighting or other crazes like that. You know, we don't have much quail fighting today, but we have other things maybe that we shouldn't be distracted by or watching. But let me read on. To hear unwelcome truths. So don't be obsessed. Don't hear unwelcome truths. To practice philosophy and to study with Bacchius, I don't know who that is, and then with Tandisis and Marcianus, I'm probably saying these wrong. To write dialogues as a student, to choose the Greek lifestyle, the camp bed and the cloak. Not really sure what that means. So, Rusticus was, I looked him up. Rusticus, he was a Stoic philosopher. And I mean, Marcus loved philosophy in general, but specifically Stoicism. Rusticus taught him the recognition that I needed to train and discipline my character. Wouldn't that be great if that was the focus of any of us today, that we would focus on training and disciplining our character? Not to be sidetracked by my interest in rhetoric. Not to be sidetracked by my interest in rhetoric. So not to be sidetracked by your interest in argument, I guess. Not to write treatises on abstract questions or deliver moralizing little sermons or compose imaginary descriptions of the simple life or the man who lives only for others. To steer clear of oratory, poetry, and belles letters. Not sure what that means. It just means basically not to be distracted by things that maybe aren't as important to living a good life. Not to dress up, just to stroll around the house or things like that. To write straightforward letters like the one he sent my mother from Sinuessa. And to have in a conciliatory way when people who have angered or annoyed us want to make up. Some of these things, you know, first of all, you got to remember it's translated from the Greek to English, so we're going to lose something in the translation. And a lot of these, I was reading how some of these writings survived. And one person, I think it was like in 1200, the year 1200, he told somebody, I have this copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It's falling apart. And he copied it over, and he distributed more copies of that. And some of them appeared to be jibber-jabber the way Marcus wrote them. So sometimes we might lose something in the translation. We have to keep that in mind. Apollonius, I didn't look up who that was or what his was, but independence and unvarying reliability. Independence. To be able to make it on our own. And unvarying reliability, to be totally reliable. We can't be shaken in our reliability to ourselves and to others, and to pay attention to nothing, no matter how fleeting, except the logos. And the logos means the word. It's interesting he would say the logos. The logos is in the Bible, is the word, right? God became the word, and the word was God. First there was the word. And frequently in the Bible it's called the logos, which is known as the word. And to be the same in all circumstances. To be the same in all circumstances. Intense pain, the loss of a child, chronic illness, and to see clearly from his example that a man can show both strength and flexibility. So to be the same, and you see a lot of people who are great leaders, even though, I mean, we never know what people are going through. So we find out later this person was going through hell on earth. They had been stricken blows of great tragedy, and yet they were consistent in their character, and you wouldn't have known that they were going through this hell on earth. They were consistent with who they were, even in times of trouble, which is difficult to do. But yet at the end, he says also that a man can show strength and still be flexible, and I think can still show that they are compassionate and empathetic. He goes on to say his patience and teaching. This is what he learned from this person. Patience and teaching. To have seen someone who clearly viewed his expertise and ability as a teacher as the humblest of virtues, and to have learned how to accept favors from friends without losing your self-respect or appearing ungrateful. So he learned how to accept favors from friends without losing self-respect or appearing ungrateful. And we should accept favors from friends. And I think I always talk about the lesson from Tony Robbins, because a lot of us get to the point where, we don't need that, or please, you don't need to do that for me. But yet we do a lot for others because of the great pleasure we get from it. So we shouldn't rob other people of the pleasure of giving. So if someone is giving to you, we have to learn to accept the gift and be grateful for it. And maybe that's what he's saying here, I think, 2,000 years ago. Now, Sextus, I know, was a philosopher, and he was a nephew of Plutarch, who was a famous philosopher also. And he learned from Sextus kindness. I wish we could see more of that today. If we could all, I since we see so little of it, specifically on the news and from our politicians and everybody, a lot of people, not everybody, and I try to keep conscious of being kind to people, just being kind. It costs us nothing, but it means a lot to other people. So, and he just has one word in that sentence, kindness. He learned from Sextus. An example of fatherly authority in the home. I think that means be a leader in your house to your children. What it means to live as nature requires, gravity without airs. To show intuitive sympathy for friends. Intuitive sympathy for friends. So you know inside what, without going too far, how to show proper sympathy for your friends. Tolerance to amateurs and sloppy thinkers. So, that goes with my philosophy, which I read. I can't remember now where. Let's be strict with ourselves, but tolerant of other people. I'm strict with my own self-discipline and behavior, but I'm tolerant of other people. Tony Robbins used to say, keep all your appointments, but don't expect anybody else to keep theirs. So don't get upset about, we have no control over whether they're going to show up or not, but we are going to show up early. His ability to get along with everyone, sharing his company, was the highest of compliments. And the opportunity and honor for those around him. I guess that's for grateful, just communing with others, being social with other people, I think you can get along with everybody without compromising your position on things. That's what we need to get to, right? We need to get to a point where we can have discussions on things without, if that's what you believe, then I hate you. We got to get away from that in this country. Going back to a biblical thing, Jesus wanted us to unite. He wanted us to be united but not uniform. We each have our own individuality, as evidenced by science today because of our fingerprints, DNA. We know that each of us is a distinct individual, yet we are all one race of human mankind. However, the government and society and culture would like to separate us, as they do, by race, color, and we need to unite as individuals. United but not uniform. How important is that? And I think that's kind of what he's getting at to here. Reading on, to investigate and analyze with understanding and logic the principles we ought to live by. We should be investigating. We should be, as much as we investigate true crime, we should investigate and be analytical and understanding logical decisions that we need to make. And we should be investigating principles that we could model our life by. And see, we should discern which ones are good and which ones are bad. Not to display anger or other emotions. Now, Stoicism gets a bad rap because it's often when someone says someone is Stoic, and we have to bring this up because it has to be. That's not what the Stoic philosophy is about. It's about staying away from the negative emotions, but the Stoics believed in expressing joy and happiness, but not in over-celebration, not too much. Their 4 tenets, of course, are wisdom, courage, temperance, justice. So temperance, not to never touch a drink. The Bible doesn't say never touch wine. No, it says don't be a drunkard. So the Stoics wouldn't believe you don't have to ever touch a drink, but you don't have 5, maybe not even 3. But maybe you have 1, maybe you have 1 or 2 at night. Temperance, within reason, not too much this way, not too much that way. So I'm not sure about that, not to show emotion, but that's what he learned from Sextus, not to display the emotions. Not to display anger or other emotions, to be free of passion and yet full of love. We should be full of love, that's for sure. To praise without bombast, to display expertise without pretension. So we should be really, we want to display expertise. We want to but without being a pompous ass, without pretension. Without being pretentious, arrogance, to be humbly bold, boldness without being a bully. I'm adding this myself. Let's get back to the text of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And now, I don't even know who this was, the literary critic Alexander. Sometimes he talked about Alexander the Great. That wouldn't have been him, but there were several Alexanders. And in this, not to be constantly correcting people, and in particular, not to jump on them whenever they make an error of usage or a grammatical mistake or mispronounce something, but just answer their question or add another example or debate the issue itself, not their phrasing of it, or make some other contribution to the discussion and insert the right expression unobtrusively. And I see, oh man, I could fall into that trap too, wanting to correct people. That's not and people do that to me too, but in a sense, I'm glad they do. Specifically with my writing, I've made many grammatical errors and I've been corrected, and I want to be corrected. But a lot of us are too quick to jump on a mistake or error. In social media, you see it, that when people make a mistake maybe in grammar, and people are quick to jump on that instead of just joining the discussion or debating the issue without bringing up the error or the improper phrasing or pronunciation of a word. And what it said here is you could insert the right expression unobtrusively. In other words, if you know the word is pronounced correctly another way, instead of correcting someone in conversation, you can insert the proper pronunciation to that word without having it being a finger pointing of you made a mistake. And I could take lessons from this. I really could. And I'm gonna keep this in mind in my future conversations, whether it be verbal or online. Fronto was a teacher of his. We discussed that in the introduction. And he learned from Fronto to recognize the malice, cunning, and hypocrisy that power produces, and the peculiar ruthlessness often shown by people from good families. Wow, that's kind of important today, right? And we can see that, to recognize the malice, the meanness, the cunning, and how they're hypocrites. And this is what power produces. This is from Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in Rome, at least in Rome at the time. The emperor of Rome is reminding himself to remember that he learned how power produces malice, cunning, and hypocrisy. Wouldn't it be great if our leaders today would be conscious of the fact that power that they have, if they would keep reminding themselves that it produces malice, cunning, and hypocrisy? Because what we see today in most of our politicians, and I'm saying not all, but most for sure, is malice, cunning, and hypocrisy. Let's go on to Alexander the Platonist. So this would have been a different Alexander. Not to be constantly telling people or writing them that I'm too busy, unless I really am. Similarly, not to be always ducking my responsibilities to the people around me because of pressing business. I've been guilty on this occasion, and I know a few associates of mine who are very guilty of this. And I try not to be. You know what, man? I'm so busy. Man, I don't have time for that. I wish I could help you, but, can't right now. And then but you know what? We have to always remember not to duck our responsibilities, and unless we're really busy, make time to be responsive to people. But, and there's also another lesson, not in here, but another lesson is not to have people, waste our time or get drawn into things we shouldn't be spending our time in, because we can get more money, but we can't get more time. And people will try to suck you into that vacuum, time wasting. Catullus. I don't know. I looked up who he was. Catullus. Oh, he was a poet that Marcus read. And from him, he learned not to shrug off a friend's resentment, even unjustified resentment, but try to put things right. So if a friend is upset with you, even if they're not really justified in being upset with you, try to put things right. Try to make amends with that person. And then it goes on, the next sentence there, to show your teachers ungrudging respect and your children unfeigned love. So authentic love to your children. Show them. Next, he writes to his brother Severus. That's who also served with him as co-emperor. He learned from him to love my family, truth and justice. It was through him that I encountered Thracia. I don't know who that was to him. Helvidius. Cato was a philosopher. Cato was a politician who, in the end, killed himself because he couldn't put up with, I think it was Nero, who was the emperor, who was just a crooked son of a bee. And Cato was one who was so strictly adherence to a code of behavior that his name was often brought up. Are you a Cato? That you make no mistakes and you're so focused on being a perfectionist. And so there's a lot written about Cato. Dion, I don't know, and Brutus, and conceived of a society of equal laws, governed by equality of status and of speech, and of rulers who respect the liberty of their subjects above all else. What if our politicians respected the liberty of us above everything else? They were a respecter of our freedom. And that is not what's happening today. And that is the big reason why you'll find a lot, including my wife, who is second generation United States citizen of America. They know that they're, I'm just thinking of Pitbull. I'm thinking of Vivek Ramaswamy, the guy who's running for president. They just remember the opportunities that their family garnered from coming to America and becoming citizens, that they don't want to see that go away. And they are fighters for that. And so we need to hold our politicians to the fire that they will always respect the liberty of the citizens above everything else. And that would be what our Constitution says that we must do to maintain our wonderful republic. Now, moving on to what Marcus wrote here, and from him as well, he learned to be steady and consistent in valuing philosophy. valuing the love of wisdom. We know the 4 pillars of Stoicism was courage, wisdom, justice, temperance. Wisdom, the love of wisdom, to constantly be learning. That's kind of the key. It's the cornerstone of getting better, becoming a better person to yourself and to others, is to keep gathering wisdom. No matter where you're at, you can get better. And to help others and be eager to share, not to be a pessimist. Marcus was always trying to be an optimist. Even though 9 kids die, everybody in Rome is dying of the plague, people tried to assassinate him, and he's trying to be an optimist. And never doubt your friends' affection for you. If your friends are showing affection for you, they're showing respect for you, don't doubt that. Take it in and accept that. And then when people incurred his disapproval, they always knew it. So be honest. Be honest with your friends and those around you. If you are against something, stand up for your beliefs. Let people know where you stand. It doesn't mean you're a bully about it, but be distinct in what you believe. And that his friends never had to speculate about his attitude to anything. No one should have to guess how you feel about something. Be open about where you stand and why you stand for what you stand for. And no one should ever have to speculate what it is that you stand for and what your stance is on something. Unfortunately, today, it's hard to do in the public forum, because although we are lucky to be able, as I am on this podcast, to broadcast to the world great philosophies and ideas, it opens yourself up to attack, haters, and criticism, but that's okay. We have to learn that that's a signpost of making your brand and your ideas more aware to other people. Maximus, I'm not sure. Maximus was an advisor, I believe. He was a politician, I believe, also a warrior. I think he's referenced in the movie Gladiator. I have to watch that again. So what he learned from Maximus: self-control and a resistance to distractions. Once again, the theme comes back with Marcus: self-control, self-discipline. And so he's constantly reminding himself self-control and resistance, and he's writing down that he learned this from several different sources, Maximus being one of them: self-control and resistance to distractions, optimism in adversity. And you'll notice he's always trying to be optimistic, and he said he learned from Maximus to be optimistic in troubles. When you're experiencing trouble, to be optimistic about it. And you can imagine he had to practice this, and it was probably a struggle for him. It was a war for him with all of his, with 9 kids dying, with people trying to assassinate him, with people in the city of Rome dying from the plague. And well, you can imagine the pressure that was on him. And also we learned, do your job without whining. I mean, he probably had to be conscious not to whine about his job. I'm sure it was, can you imagine how difficult what he was going through? Other people's certainty that what he said was what he thought, and what he did was done without malice. Never taken aback or apprehensive. Don't be taken aback by anything that's said or done. And don't be apprehensive. Be decisive. Cast your worries aside. Don't be rash or hesitant. Balance there, right? Kind of. Don't really overly rash. Don't be hesitant. Make decisions. Don't be bewildered. How many of us were bewildered about what was going on in the last 3 years with the pandemic, right? And now, at least now, the dust is starting to settle. We can see a horizon in front of us that we can go forward, and we need to start taking action in that regard. Continuing on, not to be obsequious. I remember I first learned obsequious many years ago. I had to look it up. So that's, to be subservient, to be like a waiter, to be, bowing down to other people. So we're not going to be obsequious. But also we're not going to be aggressive or paranoid either. So we're not going to be a bully, but we're not going to be shrinking in our responsibility. Now, I like this. He learned from Maximus: generosity, charity, and honesty. Man, what if everybody had that as, what if that was like on the top of their list of the day? What if that was on the tip of their tongue for how to act? Today, I'm going to make sure that I'm generous, charitable, and I'm honest. Virtue was kind of the big thing for Stoicism. It was like number one, to in everything be virtuous, no matter what we are affronted with each day. There's a right decision to make, right? There's the right thing to do. I did something today, not a big deal, but I have been putting it off. Where my truck is on the shore, I'm on my island here. On the shore, when I go over by boat, next to my truck had been, for a couple of days, had been a cup and a napkin someone had thrown there. And I had been telling myself that I was going to pick that up, do the right thing, and throw it away. And so today I picked up the cup and the napkin, put it in my truck, and then when I got into town, I threw it away. Had I procrastinated? I did. Okay, I did the right thing, but not as soon as I should have done it. Just being totally vulnerable and honest here, because it said right here, be generous, charitable, and honest. He continued to write, he learned from Maximus the sense he gave of staying on the path rather than being kept on it. Stay on your path rather than being kept on it. I guess that means other people shouldn't have to tell you to be on the right path, or you're going in the wrong direction. You keep on it yourself. That no one could ever have felt patronized by him or in a position to patronize him, and have a sense of humor. Look how many people are losing that today. I try to keep my sense of humor in an appropriate way. You have to be appropriate when you bring in humor to any situation, but we should try to bring humor without compromising the seriousness of a situation. One thing for sure, none of us are getting out alive. All right, 16, what he learned from his adopted father. He learned compassion, unwavering adherence to decisions. Unwavering adherence to decisions. Be quick to make a decision. Leaders, this is what leaders say to do. From all the leadership books that I read, leadership says, be quick to make a decision and slow to change. You know what, intuitively and subconsciously and from past learnings, you're confronted with a situation and you immediately know what the right decision is to make. Make it quickly and be slow to change it. Instead of the other way around, a lot of people are slow to make a decision and they're quick to change positions. And it's written here by Marcus Aurelius. Be unwavering in your adherence, your dedication, and your commitment to decisions once you reach them. Indifference to superficial honors. I guess that means getting awards or getting pat on the backs from other people. You have to accept it, and we should, with humble dignity, but we're going to be kind of indifferent to it. We're not going to be puffed up by that. Take on an air of arrogance just because we're getting awarded and receiving honors. And he learned from his adopted father hard work and persistence. I was taking a lesson from someone who was teaching the Tao. Tao Te Tang. Anyways, it went along with also a biblical teaching, but it was a pre-Christian philosophy that was from Lao Tse, and I was learning it from I forgot now. God, the name escaped me. But anyways, the thing was, they were, a teacher, a philosopher had asked the student, what is more strong? As you look down the rambling brook, what is more strong, the water or the rock? Right? And people pick the stone. Look at that rock. The water has to separate around that stone, but the soft water, through persistence, wears down the stone every time. And so, where was I getting that from? Somehow, something reminded me of that. Listening to anyone who could contribute contribute to the public good. So, a lot of times, especially today, if it's a certain person, we're not going to take what they're saying, even though maybe what they're saying contributes to the public good. And if it contributes to the public good, we should listen to people. This is from his adopted father. He learned dogged determination to treat people as they deserved. Be determined always to treat people right with respect and dignity, a sense of when to push and when to back off. Putting a stop to the pursuit of boys. I guess putting a stop to the pursuit of childlike things. I don't know what that means. His altruism. Not expecting his friends to keep him entertained at dinner or to travel with him unless, in parentheses, unless they wanted to. So, if you want to go on a trip, if you want to make travel somewhere, don't guilt your friends and family into going with you if they don't want to. But obviously, and so you go on your own. If that's what you want to do, you do it. And if your family or friends want to go with you, then so be it, if they want to. Now, if anyone had to stay behind and take care of something, always, okay, if someone has to stay behind, they don't want to go. When you return, you want to be the same person you were when you left. You don't treat them differently because they didn't join you on this trip. I am taking from the text here. His searching questions at meetings. Always asking questions, trying to clarify things. A kind of single-mindedness, almost never content with the first impressions or breaking off the discussion prematurely. So to not take everything immediately at face value. How something might initially spark a reaction from you, but to take a beat and then maybe inquire more before you make a decision. Before you decide on something, investigate further. That's so important. His constancy to friends, never getting fed up with them or playing favorite. Treat all your friends the same. Don't get frustrated with your friends. You're just always there for them. You be the best friend to them, and then it'll come back to you. But don't expect that from them, and don't play favorites to your friends. Treat all your friends always as great as you can. Be servant leaders to your friends. Self-reliance, always. Self-reliance. Taking care of yourself. Being self-sufficient as you can be. And always being cheerful. Cheerfulness. Goes to a biblical saying, I think it's Thessalonians 4, or I might have this wrong. Be joyous in the Lord always. And Paul repeated that. He said, I'm going to repeat this. Be joyous in the Lord always. Also, he learned from his adopted father. He learned a lot from his adopted father. Advanced planning, well in advance. And his discreet attention to even minor things. My wife is so great at this. She knows ahead of time that we plan on going during Christmas time to New York. She buys the plane tickets for that trip 7-8 months in advance, if not a year in advance. And she pays discreet attention to even minor things. And when I say minor things, I'm talking, when we get the bill for dinner, I'm more likely to just, what's the tip amount, and pay it. She'll notice that they charge us twice for one thing, that they charge us for something we didn't receive. She pays attention to those minor details that are important. And that's why we go well together. His restrictions on acclamations and all attempts to flatter him. So he shut people down flattering him. His constant devotion to the empire's needs. Remember that when John F. Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country? Shouldn't we be asking more a devotion to the United States? What can we do to the needs of America? Too many people want America to take care of them, or too many in the government want people to be needy of the government. That's why they are trying to push socialism and Marxism on us, because they want the people to be in need instead of being self-reliant. Okay, continuing with the text. His stewardship of the treasury. his willingness to take responsibility and blame for both. We have to learn to take responsibility for everything, even the good things, and we're going to take the blame also. His attitude to the gods, sometimes they refer to God and or gods, no superstitiousness. And his attitude to mankind, I think, no demagoguery, no currying favor, no pandering. Always sober, always steady, and never vulgar or prey to fads. Now, he's learning this from his adopted father, who was a politician. The way he handled the material comforts that fortune had supplied him. He had abundance. He was very prosperous. And he handled what he had without arrogance and without apology. He didn't apologize for how well he did. And we shouldn't apologize for the great things that we've accomplished or that we have, things that we have. We don't put it in people's faces, and we're not arrogant about it, but we don't apologize for doing well. But if we do more and have more, we can give more, we can share more, and we can be more charitable. No one ever called him glib or shameless or pedantic. He wasn't boring, in other words. Glib, shameless, or pedantic. They saw him for what he was, a man tested by life. We're all going to be tested. We're all going to have challenges. But he was also accomplished, and he was unswayed by flattery, qualified to govern both himself and them. So the guy, his adopted father, who was a emperor, he was self-disciplined, and he was self-disciplined in not only governing himself, but also the people. His respect for people, and that he practiced philosophy, at least those who were sincere about it. Okay, let me read that again. His respect for people who practice philosophy. So people who were like him, who loved wisdom, who tried to keep learning, which I do. I love people who are into philosophy, who like to keep learning to be better. And he loved those people specifically because they were sincere about it. But he didn't denigrate the others. And he didn't listen to them either. But without denigrating the others or listening to them. So people who weren't into learning more, being more, becoming more, getting better every day in every way like we are, but he didn't denigrate the people who weren't into that. But also, he didn't listen to what they had to say, really, right? They didn't want to learn. They didn't want to know how to do things better in a better way. He didn't denigrate them, but he also didn't take their counsel. That's a good way to live too. It just goes to, you do your thing, I'll do my thing, and I have respect for you if you don't want to learn another thing or advance in any way whatsoever. That's okay. I'm not going to denigrate for you, but I'm probably not going to hang around you too much or listen to what you have to say. And I say that with a sense of humor, which I learned earlier in the text. All right, he learned a lot from his adoptive father, his ability to feel at ease with people and to put them at their ease without being pushy. We can do that, right? We can come into and I have to practice it. You have to learn to come into a situation at ease with people. Maybe we do that by coming in with a smile. We greet people with a smile. Hey, how are you? But we're not overbearing or pushing about it. See, if people sense that in us, that we're at ease, they'll be at ease back with us. People are going to mirror back what they sense from us. Right? Dogs do. That's why dogs sense people. Isn't it funny how dogs they'll immediately growl at somebody else they sense. They sense when something's not right. And so if something's not right with us and the way we're thinking, people will sense that. So we need to come into a situation at ease without being pushy. He also learned from him his willingness to take adequate care of himself. So he took care of himself. He was not a hypochondriac thinking there's germs everywhere and I'm not going to touch this. And he was not overly paranoid about it. But he took care of himself. He kept a good appearance. He didn't ignore things that he should be doing. Flossed his teeth, brushed his teeth. I added that myself. So because he took care of himself physically exercise, and what he ate, then he hardly ever needed, and this is what he wrote, hardly ever needed medical attention or drugs or any sort of salve or ointment. This in particular, his willingness to yield the floor to experts. Oh, this in particular, he was willing to yield the floor to experts in oratory, law, psychology, whatever, and to support them energetically so that each of them could fulfill his potential, right? So we're in a situation, hey, listen, let's hear from the plumber, okay? Because his expertise is in the plumbing. And so you know what? Show him respect for what his input is going to be. Show respect for, like Tony Robbins always said, everybody is our superior in something because they've spent more time studying it. So give people their due. And energetically, not in a passivity way, in a passive way, hear from the expertise of what they have to put. No, but energetically. Man, I think that's important. I wish we would all do that. And I'm going to continue to try to be better at doing this. He respected tradition without needing to constantly congratulate himself for safeguarding our traditional values. So he respected the values. We should respect American values, conservative values. I'm adding this for myself. And we can do that without expecting to be congratulated for it. It's just the right thing to do. And he wrote, he learned from his adopted father not to be prone to go off on tangents or pulled in all directions, but sticking with the same old places and the same old things. I don't know. I think that just means to, be steady. Continue on. Do your normal things. This is what you normally do. Do your normal things on a day-to-day basis. He also wrote that his adoptive father, he learned the way that he could have one of his migraines, and then he could go right back to doing what he was doing, fresh and at the top of his game. I have to learn to do that. Sometimes I get migraines and they're just, they're crazy painful. It feels like a knife behind my eye to the point it could be tear. But I need to learn, though, when that's over, when I've come through that, get right back to what I was doing with as much vigor as I was beforehand. It's a good principle to have. Let's see what else he says. That he had so few secrets, only state secrets, in fact, and not all that many of those. Obviously, he was a politician, emperor. You're going to have some state secrets for the good of all the people, but there was very few of those. Very few. Mostly he was open. It's funny how people have secrets, man, that aren't really secrets, right? Oh, my God. You're just asking, because you're interested in a person. Oh, what'd you sell your house for? Well, I don't like to talk about that. It's public record. I can find out what you sold your house for. In fact, I don't really care. I'm just asking in conversation, but people are so secretive about where they're going and what they're doing. Most people don't care. All right, let's see. Okay. I'm skipping a little bit because some of it's rambling. He learned this from his father. He never exhibited rudeness, lost control of himself, or turned violent. So really self-control, again, of the emotions. Boy, it's hard sometimes. Boy, we got to, and I don't do it. I'm not rude. It's hard, though, but I'm conscious of it now. I'm not going to say 10 years ago I was that way, but I can tell you I'm not now. So I'm not congratulating myself. So he never exhibited rudeness, lost control of himself, or turned violent. We don't want to do that. No one ever saw him sweat. Yeah, maybe that's where people got that term. Maybe they got that from the meditation. You ever hear that? Never let him see you sweat. Probably got that. It was probably passed down. It became kind of famous, I guess. You could have said of him, as they say of Socrates, that he knew how to enjoy and abstain from things that most people find it hard to abstain from and all too easy to enjoy. Strength, perseverance, self-control in both areas, the mark of a soul in readiness, indomitable. I'm just going to shoot right to the last paragraph of Book 1. It was longer than I thought it was going to be. That when I became interested in philosophy, I didn't fall into the hands of charlatans. Be discerning on what philosophy you're learning. And didn't get bogged down in writing treatises or become absorbed by logic chopping or preoccupied with physics. All things for which we need the help of fortune and the gods. So that's the end of book 1 in Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. I think there's a lot we can take from there. So if you're going to get the book, and I suggest you do, I mean, there's several different translations, but I would suggest the one by Ryan Holiday, which is the one I read from, which is by Gregory Hayes. It's the Gregory Hayes translation of Meditations. I suggest that you get it. It's a great philosophy. It's great words from, someone who studied Stoicism. And Stoicism, I read something, because people wonder, I come across the question, is Stoicism narcissistic? Is Stoicism narcissistic? And this is what I read, and I think it's true. Stoicism as a philosophy is not inherently narcissistic. There may be narcissistic people who study Stoicism, but it isn't inherently narcissistic, and it does not promote narcissistic traits. In fact, Stoicism's core principles are focused on virtue, right? We talked about that, always doing the right thing, personal growth, which is what this podcast is all about, personal growth, humility, self-awareness, empathy, which are fundamentally opposed to narcissistic tendencies of self-importance and egotism. So Stoicism is a good philosophy, I think, to study and adopt. It's separate and above. It's not separate, not above. It's separate from Christianity, although a lot of Christian principles are in line with Stoicism, which a lot of the philosophy was created pre-Christian time, before Christ. And so I think it has a lot of value to it for making us live a better life. So I would suggest, I'm going to put a link to that book in the description in the YouTube channel. Also in the show notes of the podcast platforms. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It helps the algorithm. It tells the computer, as we say in the business, it tells the computer people are paying attention to the show, they're interacting. Please leave a comment, subscribe. It just tells, and then they show it to other people who are interested in motivation, inspiration, philosophies for a great life, everybody, anchored in faith, and we're unashamed. All right. Thanks, everybody, for checking in. I'm Cliff Yates. This is the Cliff Yates Show. As always, you're in the right place.